I don't think I've ever hated a wedding more than my sister's. Not because I didn't love her. I did. But because every time I looked at her fiancé, I felt something I had no business feeling. His name was Evan. Tall, quiet, a little too good-looking for his own good. He had that effortless kind of charm that made people trust him instantly, the kind that made me wish I didn't notice the curve of his jaw or the way his voice dropped when he said my name. I met him a year ago at a family barbecue, when he was still the new boyfriend. My sister, Emma, had introduced him like she was showing off a trophy. Hand on his chest, bright smile, proud as hell. I'd shaken his hand, pretending not to care, pretending I wasn't instantly aware of how firm his grip was, or how his eyes lingered just a second too long when we made contact. Now, a year later, I was standing in a rented Airbnb 2 days before their wedding, trying to avoid him at all costs. The place was chaotic. My parents bustling around, Emma obsessing over last-minute decorations, friends coming in and out. The only quiet spot was the upstairs bathroom, and I'd claimed it as my refuge. I'd just stepped out of the shower, towel around my waist, steam fogging the mirror, when I heard the door creak open. Occupied, I called out, expecting it to be Emma or one of her friends, but the voice that answered wasn't hers. Yeah, I can see that. I froze. I knew that voice. Turning, I saw Evan standing in the doorway, still dressed in his morning run gear. Damp t-shirt clinging to his chest, joggers hanging low on his hips. His hair was wet, messy from sweat and mist, and his eyes locked on me like he'd walked in on purpose. "What are you?" "The downstairs shower's busted," he said quickly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Emma's using the other one. I just need to rinse off." "You mind?" I swallowed, gripping the towel tighter. "This bathroom's kind of occupied, man." He gave a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, I noticed." There was a beat of silence. The steam swirled between us, the air thick and humid. I should have left, should have walked right past him and out the door. But something in the way he looked at me, calm, steady, almost testing, rooted me in place. Evan reached for the hem of his shirt and pulled it over his head, revealing a body that looked unfairly sculpted, tanned from the sun. My throat went dry. "Evan!" I warned. "What?" he said lightly, tossing the shirt on the counter. "You said you were done." He stepped past me toward the shower, turning the water back on. The spray hit his skin, droplets tracing the lines of his back. I could feel the heat radiating off him, even from where I stood. I turned away, trying to focus on my reflection in the fogged mirror, trying not to look at the way the water slid down his neck. "You can go," he said over the rush of water. "Yeah," I muttered, reaching for my clothes. "That's the plan." Except when I moved, he turned, and our eyes met through the haze. Neither of us looked away. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. But suddenly, he was right there, hand on my wrist, grip gentle but firm. "Evan, I started, but my voice came out rough, uncertain." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the soap, the clean heat of his skin. His expression was unreadable, jaw tight, eyes flicking between mine. "Don't," I said quietly. "You're getting married." "I know." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "That's the problem." Before I could react, his hand moved, and suddenly I was being pulled toward the shower, steam swallowing us both whole. The sound of the water drowned everything out, the rush of blood in my ears, the pounding of my heart. My towel hit the tile, forgotten. He stood there under the spray, water running down his face, his chest rising and falling fast. "I shouldn't be doing this," he said. "Then don't," I replied. But neither of us moved. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we weren't supposed to say. Then, slowly, like something inevitable, he reached out. Fingers brushing against my shoulder, my chest, tracing down my arm. I should have stopped him, should have pushed him away. But instead, I let him. And that's where everything started. In that small upstairs bathroom, with the sound of the shower and a secret that would ruin everything if anyone found out. The first thing I remember after that moment was the heat. Not just from the water, but from him. Evan's hand was still on my arm, and I could feel it. The steady, slow tremor that betrayed the calm expression on his face. He didn't speak. Neither did I. The sound of the shower filled the silence, a steady hiss that somehow made everything feel louder. The quickness of my breath, the heartbeat pounding in my ears. His eyes searched mine like he was waiting for me to pull away, to call him out, to end it. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Then he leaned in. Just slightly, just enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. "This is a mistake," he murmured, though his voice didn't sound convinced. "I know," I whispered back, but neither of us did anything to stop it. The water rolled down between us, the space closing until his forehead was resting against mine. Every muscle in my body was screaming to get out of there, to walk away before this went too far. But there was something heavier, something magnetic, holding me there. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked, my voice shaking. Evan's jaw tightened. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." That hit harder than it should have. He looked away immediately, like he regretted saying it. But it was too late. The words hung there, burning through the steam. "You're marrying my sister," I said, quieter this time. "I know," he said again, eyes dark, focused. "And I love her, I do. But—" He stopped. His hand dropped from my arm, landing against the tile behind me instead. His head tilted down, his shoulders tense. "But—" I pressed. Evan's throat worked as he swallowed, his voice barely audible now. "But when I'm around you, I don't feel like myself anymore." The sentence knocked the air out of me. Because it wasn't just him. I felt the same way. We stood there for what felt like forever. The sound of the shower had become background noise, the room spinning between guilt and want. Then, like he'd made a decision he couldn't take back, Evan leaned in again. This time closer. His lips brushed against my jaw, light as a breath. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it was enough to make my skin catch fire. "Stop," I said, but my voice came out more like a plea than a command. "I can't," he whispered. And then he kissed me. It was brief. Just a second. But it felt like something cracked open between us. I stumbled back, water splashing between us. My mind was racing, every thought tangled and panicked. "Evan, we can't—" "I know," he cut in, his voice rough now. "I know we can't." He ran a hand through his wet hair, looking suddenly older, worn out. "I shouldn't have done that." "You think?" I snapped, though my voice shook. I was trying to sound angry, but mostly I just sounded scared. Evan exhaled hard, leaning back against the tile. "You don't understand. This isn't—" He stopped himself, jaw flexing. "Forget it." I grabbed my towel off the floor and stepped out of the shower, water dripping onto the tiles. "Yeah, maybe we should both forget this ever happened." He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me with that unreadable expression. When I opened the door, I heard his voice behind me, low, strained. "You think I haven't tried?" I froze, but I didn't turn around. I didn't trust myself to. "Evan," I said quietly, "just marry her. Pretend this was nothing." And then I walked out before either of us could make another mistake. Downstairs, the noise of the house felt unreal. Laughter, voices, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Everyone was oblivious. My sister's laughter carried through the open window, bright and carefree. I stood at the top of the stairs, towel still damp around my waist, my skin prickling like the guilt had seeped into every pore. I went back to my room, shut the door, and leaned against it, heart still hammering. Because the truth was, it wasn't nothing. And even if we both wanted to forget, I already knew that neither of us would. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was the shower, the fog, the water, the look on his face right before he kissed me. It looped in my head until I stopped trying to sleep altogether and just stared at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to come up. By the time morning finally dragged itself through the blinds, I'd decided one thing. I was going to act normal, cold, detached, whatever it took. If I treated it like nothing happened, maybe he would too. Except he didn't. When I came downstairs, Emma was already in the kitchen with a mug of coffee, fussing over her wedding binder. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Can you grab some extra napkins from the pantry? Evan said he's setting up breakfast outside." Of course he was. I mumbled something like sure and went for the pantry, trying to steady my breathing. My pulse spiked when I heard his voice outside, that calm, deep tone that had felt too close last night. By the time I stepped out to the patio, I'd rehearsed my face into something casual. But the moment our eyes met, all that effort crumbled. He froze mid-motion, a carton of orange juice in one hand. His expression didn't change, but I saw it. The slight twitch in his jaw, the flicker of something behind his eyes. "Morning," I said quietly, pretending to be distracted by the table setup. "Morning," he replied too evenly. The silence between us stretched tight. "About last night," he started, but I cut him off before he could finish. "Don't." I dropped the napkins on the table harder than I meant to. "We're not talking about that." Evan nodded once, his lips pressed together. "Fine." But then, after a pause, he added, "You okay?" I hated that question. The way he said it, like he actually cared. Like he hadn't been the one who shattered everything. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice didn't sound convincing. Emma came out a moment later, saving me from answering anything else. She threw her arms around him, kissed his cheek, completely oblivious to the tension humming in the air. He smiled back at her, or at least tried to, but I saw how stiff it was. I stood there, watching them, something twisting hard in my stomach. It should have been guilt. Maybe it was. But it wasn't only guilt. "Hey," Emma said, looking at me. "Can you drive Evan into town later? He needs to pick up the tuxes? I'm finishing centerpieces with Mom." My throat went dry. Can't Dad do it?" "He's taking the caterer tour," she said cheerfully. "You're free, right?" I opened my mouth to argue, but Evan spoke first. "It's fine. We can go together." Our eyes met again, and there it was, that same unspoken tension, sharp enough to cut through the morning air. "Cool," I muttered. "Yeah, sure." The drive into town was quiet, painfully quiet. The radio was on, but neither of us was listening. I kept my hands locked on the steering wheel, eyes on the road. Evan sat beside me, leaning against the window, sunglasses hiding his expression. It was impossible not to notice the small things, his hand resting against his thigh, the veins along his forearm, the way his voice sounded when he finally broke the silence. "I didn't sleep much either," he said softly. "Not my problem," I said, a little too quickly. "I know, but it feels like it is," I exhaled sharply. "Don't do this. Not here." He didn't respond right away. Then, in a tone I barely recognized, he said, "You think I wanted that to happen?" I didn't answer. "Because I didn't," he continued. "But when I looked at you—" He stopped, shaking his head. "It doesn't matter." I clenched the steering wheel tighter, my pulse thudding in my ears. "You're marrying my sister Evan. You can't look at me like that. You can't." "I know," he said again, cutting me off. "Believe me, I've been telling myself the same thing all morning." The rest of the drive was a blur. Neither of us spoke again. When we reached the tux rental shop, Evan stepped out first. I followed a few seconds later, my chest tight. The bell above the door jingled, and the clerk greeted us with a too cheerful smile. Evan handled the paperwork, all professionalism, all calm. But when he handed me a suit bag, our fingers brushed, and it was like every nerve in my hand lit up at once. He must have felt it too, because he pulled back quickly, jaw tight. "You all right?" the clerk asked, looking between us. "Fine," we both said at the same time. Outside, the silence followed us back to the car. Evan finally spoke when we reached the doors. "I'll make this right," he said quietly. "How?" I asked. "By pretending it didn't happen?" He looked at me for a long time. "If that's what it takes." And then he walked off toward the car, leaving me standing there in the heat, confused, angry, and already knowing this wasn't over. Because no matter how much we both wanted to forget, we were lying to ourselves. And lies like that don't last long. By the time we got back to the house, the sun was already starting to dip behind the trees. The backyard was glowing. Strings of white lights had been hung between the patio posts, flickering on one by one as the sky shifted from gold to gray-blue. Inside, the vibe was chaos. Emma was pacing the living room, phone in one hand, wine in the other, talking way too fast to someone on the other end. My mom was in the kitchen, up to her elbows in last-minute wedding prep, barking questions about table layouts and who was bringing the gluten-free bread. My dad was assembling chairs outside and cursing quietly every time one wobbled. No one noticed us come in, which, honestly, was a relief. I went straight upstairs to drop off the tux, trying to breathe normally. But the second I stepped into the hallway, I heard a door open behind me. Evan's voice, quiet. "Can we talk?" I turned, exhausted. "Not here. Not now." He nodded slowly, then glanced toward the far end of the hall. "Then tonight, after everyone's asleep." I should have said no. I meant to. But instead, I gave a small nod and walked into my room without saying another word. That night, dinner was a blur. I sat at the table across from Evan, surrounded by family and friends, everyone buzzing with excitement. Emma kept glancing at her checklist, laughing nervously every time someone toasted the happy couple. Evan played the part perfectly, attentive, warm, charming. But every time our eyes met, something sharp passed between us. I kept my head down, ate quietly, tried not to count the minutes. But I knew. So did he. It was just past midnight when I heard the soft knock. 3 slow taps. I opened the door, heart pounding. Evan stood there in a t-shirt and sweatpants, barefoot, hands in his pockets. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Not with desire this time, but something heavier. He stepped in and I closed the door behind him. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt different now. Not tense, just loaded. I sat on the edge of the bed. He stayed standing near the window, looking out at the dark yard below. The distant hum of crickets was the only sound. "I keep thinking," he said finally, his voice quiet. "What would have happened if I never met her?" I looked up at him sharply. "Don't say that." He turned. "Why not?" "Because you did meet her. And you asked her to marry you." He exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "Yeah, I know, but lately I've been asking myself why I did. That made my chest tighten." "You're scared. That's all this is." "Maybe," he said. "But what if it's more than that? What if I said yes to the idea of her, the life, the future?" "Not her exactly." I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I wanted to hear where that thought ended. He stepped closer, still careful, still giving space. "And then you came along." "I've always been along," I said. "You just didn't notice me before." That stopped him. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like the right words might be hiding in the carpet. "I don't want to hurt her," he said. "Then don't. But I also can't stop thinking about you. About what we did. About what it meant." "It didn't mean anything," I said automatically. Too quickly, Evan looked up. "You don't believe that?" I didn't. But I wished I did. For a long moment, we just sat there, saying nothing. Then Evan stood, running a hand through his hair. "I leave with her tomorrow," he said. "I know what I'm supposed to do. But part of me wonders if I'm walking into something for the wrong reasons." "And the other part?" I asked. "The other part wants to stay here. In this room." I couldn't breathe. He didn't touch me, didn't kiss me. He just stood there like he didn't know how to take the next step in either direction. Eventually he whispered, "Good night," and walked out of the room. And I just sat there in the dark, staring at the door, wondering how the hell this was all going to end. I woke up the next morning with a knot in my stomach. For a second, I forgot where I was. Just the hazy light of early morning slipping through unfamiliar curtains, the faint sound of someone moving downstairs. And then it all came rushing back. The shower, the conversations, the fact that today Evan was going to marry my sister. I sat up slowly, rubbing my hands over my face. The house was already awake. I could hear Emma's voice bouncing through the halls, high and bright with nerves. Someone was laughing in the kitchen. Car doors opened and shut outside. The day had begun. There was no space for doubt, no space for hesitation, just movement. Hair, makeup, suits, music cues, photographers arriving early. Everything was happening, whether we were ready or not. By noon, we were at the venue, a small, beautiful space near the woods. White chairs lined up neatly on either side of a flower-lined aisle. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, the sky bright and clear like it was mocking us with how perfect it all looked. I stayed busy, doing whatever people asked of me, holding bouquets, moving water bottles, avoiding eye contact with Evan. He was everywhere and nowhere. Always on the edge of my vision, laughing with the groomsmen, shaking hands with relatives, smiling, playing the part. But I could tell it was a performance. I caught him glancing at me once during the group photos. Just a flick of his eyes. But it was enough to send my heart into a tailspin. "Can you fix your collar?" the photographer asked me, and I snapped back to reality, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face in half. When the music started and Emma stepped out onto the grass, I thought I might throw up. She looked beautiful. Genuinely. Not just because she was my sister, because she was glowing, happy, in love, and Evan, he looked at her the way a groom is supposed to. Or maybe he was trying to. His smile faltered for a split second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. And that split second felt like 1,000 years. The ceremony moved forward like a dream. Scripted, polished, all the usual moments. They held hands. They exchanged rings. The officiant said a few words about love and commitment and timing. And then it was time for the vows. Emma's were sweet, a little nervous, full of stories about how they met, how safe he made her feel, how she knew from the start. Everyone smiled. A few people teared up. Then it was Evan's turn. He cleared his throat, holding her hands in both of his. "Emma," he began, voice steady. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were someone I wanted to know more of. Your kindness, your laugh, your ability to make everything around you feel lighter. I love all of it." She beamed at him, squeezing his hands. "But," he said, and something shifted. I felt it before anyone else did. The stillness in the air. The silence that fell like a curtain. He paused. Blinked. I need to be honest." Everyone leaned forward just a little, smiling, assuming it was a sweet twist. A story. A joke. But I knew that tone. I knew what was coming before he said another word. Evan looked out at the guests, then back at Emma. "I'm not who I thought I was when I asked you to marry me." Emma's smile faltered. "I wanted this life," he said quietly. "I wanted to be the man you deserve, and for a while, I thought I could be, but something changed. And it wouldn't be fair to stand here and make promises I'm not certain I can keep," someone whispered. A quiet murmur rippled through the rows of chairs. Emma stared at him, confused. "Evan," she said softly, "what are you saying?" He let go of her hands. "I can't marry you." Everything went still. A bird chirped somewhere in the trees, oblivious to the wreckage happening beneath it. Emma took a step back, blinking like she'd just been slapped. The officiant looked frozen. My mother gasped. My father stood up from his chair like he wasn't sure if he was about to yell or collapse. And I just stood there, still as stone, watching it all happen, watching Evan turn away from her and look directly at me. He didn't say another word. Not to her, not to anyone. He stepped off the altar and walked down the aisle like someone escaping a burning building. Fast, silent, his jaw set. The crowd was stunned into silence. No one moved. No one chased him. Except me. I didn't even think about it. I just turned and went after him, heart racing, not sure what I was going to say or if I'd punch him or scream or both. By the time I caught up with him, he was already at the far end of the venue, near the parking lot behind a row of pine trees, pacing in wide, erratic circles. "Evan!" I shouted. He stopped mid-step, turned, looked at me like he was expecting this, like he was waiting for it. "What the hell did you just do?" I demanded, breathless. He didn't answer right away. His shoulders rose and fell with each shaky inhale. I couldn't go through with it. You don't just leave someone at the altar, man. You don't do that to her. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, stepping back. I know. But I couldn't lie to her like that. Not for the rest of my life. This isn't just about you, I snapped. You embarrassed her, my family, everyone. I didn't mean to. Then why look at me? I said. Why look at me like that if you didn't want them to know? He froze, his eyes locked on mine, and I could see it now. The fear, the guilt, the deep mess of everything he hadn't said. Because I wanted you to know, he said. Quiet, steady. My heart dropped. You think that makes any of this better? I asked. You think telling me changes what just happened back there? No, he said. But if I walked away without saying it, it would have eaten me alive. I shook my head, trying to calm the storm rising inside me. You could have figured this out weeks ago, months, before you asked her to marry you. I didn't know, he said quickly. Not then. I wasn't even sure what it was. I just knew every time I was around you, something felt wrong. But not bad. Just different. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I wanted to yell at him, to tell him that it didn't matter, that none of this mattered now. But I didn't, because some part of me, the same part that didn't stop him in the shower, didn't want to let go either. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice hoarse. He looked away, as if ashamed to say it out loud. I don't know. A chance to explain, to fix it, to figure it out. You just blew up your entire life, my sister's life. There is no figuring it out after that. I know, he said. But if I married her while thinking about you, it would have ruined all of us eventually. At least now there's a chance to be honest. I didn't say anything. I didn't have the words. Behind us, I could hear the faint rise of voices. People shouting, asking questions. Emma's name being called over and over. She doesn't know, does she? I asked. Not about me. No, he said. I'd never do that to you. I nodded, slowly, though I wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. Evan stepped closer, cautiously, like I might bolt. I don't expect anything from you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just couldn't leave today without letting you know the truth. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to read between the lines, to see what part of this was real and what part was still wrapped up in chaos. And then I said, you should go. He hesitated. You sure? Yeah, I said. Go figure yourself out, away from all of us. He nodded, not pushing, not asking for more. And then he turned, walked to his car, and drove off. And I just stood there, alone, listening to the silence he left behind. I didn't go back right away. I stood under the trees for a long time after Evan drove off, listening to the wind move through the branches and trying to slow the pounding in my chest. Eventually, I returned to the venue, and everything was exactly how you'd expect a canceled wedding to look. People scattered, voices hushed, chairs half empty. Some guests quietly leaving, pretending not to look me in the eye. I found my mom in the bridal suite, pacing with her phone clutched in both hands like it might break. Where the hell did he go? She said the second she saw me. He left, I said. He's not coming back. Her face paled. What did you say to him? Nothing, I said. It was his choice. She opened her mouth again, probably to blame me for something, but my dad stepped in, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Let it go, he muttered. Emma was sitting in the corner of the room, her dress still perfect, her posture not. She wasn't crying. She just looked like someone who'd been hit by a truck, dazed, hurt, frozen in place. I walked in quietly and sat down across from her. She didn't look at me for a long time. I didn't see it coming, she said finally, voice flat. Not even a hint. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. More than I could explain. She nodded slowly. Did you know? That question hung in the air between us like a blade. I didn't lie. But I didn't tell her everything either. I knew he was confused. I said carefully, but not that he'd do this. Not like this. She looked at me then, really looked at me, like maybe part of her knew there was more. But she didn't press. "I feel stupid," she whispered. "You're not," I said. "You just loved him." She nodded, eyes glassy, and then looked back down at her hands. "If he reaches out again, I don't want to know. I don't want to hear it." I swallowed hard. "Okay." And just like that, the door between her and Evan closed, and maybe between her and me too. The next few weeks were weird, quiet. The kind of quiet that fills a house when something big has come and gone. Not a storm, but the wreckage after. Emma stayed with our parents for a while, then went on a trip alone, somewhere coastal. She stopped texting me. I didn't blame her. As for Evan, he disappeared. No messages, no calls, just silence. I didn't know where he went. And I didn't go looking. Part of me thought that was the end. That what happened was just something that existed in the in-between. Not meant to last, just meant to break everything open. But then, almost 2 months later, he showed up. Not at my apartment, not at work. At a coffee shop, just before closing, like he knew I'd be there. I was waiting for my drink when I turned and saw him. Same eyes, same expression. Except this time, he looked like someone who had done the work, who'd faced himself. I froze. "Hey," he said softly. I nodded. "Hey." Neither of us said anything for a long moment. "I've been in Denver," he finally said, "with my brother. Working, trying to figure things out." "And?" I asked. "And I think I know who I am now." I didn't know what to say to that, so I waited. "I'm not here to pick up where we left off," he said quickly. "I don't think either of us even knows what that would look like. But I am here to say, I meant it. What I felt. What I said." I exhaled slowly, hands in my pockets. That was a hell of a time to realize it. "I know," he said, "but I wanted you to hear it again, without the wedding, without the pressure. Just me." There was a pause. "And then," he added, "if you ever want to talk again, even just as yourself, I'd like that." I nodded, quiet. "I'll think about it." He smiled once. Not the cocky grin, not the wedding day panic, just something real. Then he left, and I sat down with my coffee, watching the steam rise, thinking about everything that had led us here. What he did was reckless. What I let happen was selfish. And the damage we left behind was real. But maybe, not everything was ruined. Some things break just to become something else, something truer.